this video, we're going to be talking about smart variables. Smart variables are a feature that was introduced in REDCap version 8.5, which the University of Colorado moved to this summer. A normal variable looks at a specific data point in the file. It references just one field, in just one event, or just one instance, and it always points to that exact same item. Smart variables reference something other than a specific data field. For example, they might reference the current user on the project, the current record, or the current form, or a specified form or survey. They can also reference general events and arms. So instead of having to point to a specific event, such as visit 1, you can point to the previous visit or the next visit. Similarly with repeating instruments, instead of having to point to a specific instance, you can use smart variables to point to the first instance or the last one. Smart variables are dynamic. They adapt based on the context. So what are some ways that you can use smart variables? One of the easiest and most obvious ways is to pipe and display information. For example, if you want to display the data access group name that a record belongs to, a smart variable can be used in a descriptive field to display that. You could also use them with regular variables. For example, perhaps you want to pull the height variable from the previous event so that you don't have to re-enter it every time you meet with the same patient. Finally, you can combine smart variables. So for instance, you might want to display the survey URL for a specific survey, but use the one from the previous event, not the current one, so that someone can go back and fill out something they've missed. Where can you use smart variables? You can use smart variables in lots of different places. You can use them in descriptive fields to simply provide information. You can use them to reference items in calculations or conditional logic. You can use them in your automated survey invitation logic or in your survey queue logic. And you can use them to pipe information into a particular field. This includes piping information into the @default action tag so that the default value is whatever was listed in a previous event or a previous form. Now we're going to go over the different smart variables that are currently available in REDCap. One important thing to note about the smart variable names is that they use a hyphen to connect words within them. Previously in REDCap, you may have been used to using underscores to fill in blanks where there are spaces, such as in a variable name or in an event name. Smart variables will always use the hyphen. There are 4 smart variables that apply specifically to users. The smart variable username will just display the current user's REDCap username. The smart variable user DAG name will give the DAG name for the current user's data access group. This is the official name, such as UCD_group. User DAG ID will give that current user's DAG ID number, and user DAG label will give that current user's DAG label, such as UCD group. There are also 4 smart variables involving the record. You can display the record name, the record DAG name, the record DAG ID, and the record DAG label. There are 3 smart variables that apply specifically for forms. The first one, isForm, simply detects if the current instrument is a form and displays a 1 for yes and a 0 for no. This can be useful in things like branching logic if you want certain questions to appear or become an option only if the form in question is being viewed as a data entry form, not as a survey. The second smart variable for forms is the form URL. This will display the form URL for the current record, event, and instance. So it'll take you to, specifically, for that person, in that event or instance, or both, the data entry form that you specify. Note in this one that you have the smart variable name, form URL, the colon, and then you have to put the instrument name. This is the official REDCap instrument name, like you would see in the data dictionary, or like you see in the URL. You can also combine this with event names in longitudinal projects to pull specifically for that event. Finally, there's a form link. This will display a customized link that will take you to that data entry form for that specific record. In this, you have the smart variable name, form link, the colon with the instrument name, like in the form URL, and then the custom text that you want to be displayed. Over on the right, you can see a few different examples as how you might put that together. You can use this in a classic project, in a longitudinal project, and you can use it with other smart variables to reference different events in that longitudinal project. There are many different smart variables that work with surveys. The first, isSurvey, detects if the current instrument is a survey, with 1 yes, 0 no, similar to isForm. Survey URL instrument displays the URL for a current record event instance for that survey. It'll take people straight to that survey. You may have seen this survey URL in your survey invitations. Survey link instrument custom text will provide a custom link that will take you to that survey. Survey queue URL will display the URL for the survey queue in the current record. Survey queue link custom text will provide a customized HTML link to take you to the survey queue. Finally, we have survey time completed instrument, and this will show the date and time that a survey was completed. So for this, you have again the smart variable name, survey time completed, and then you give the form name, follow-up, and it will provide the date and time that the survey was completed. Note how it's giving you the label here. Similarly to how multiple choice questions will by default pipe the label for the answer choices and not the raw value, survey time completed and the companion survey date completed will both give you the label for the time and date the survey was completed. If you want the value, something you can actually do calculations off of, you'll need to add the value modifier. Survey date completed shows the simple date that the survey was completed without the full timestamp. Possibly one of the most useful places for smart variables is working with longitudinal projects. The smart variable event name gives the current event name. You can use this to simply display the event name, or you can use it to tell REDCap that you want to reference the specific event name and pull a variable from it. For example, within this event name, I want to know height. Event label gives the current event label. Because this is just the label, it's not the actual name, you won't be able to use this option for piping. Previous event name references the event immediately before the current one. This can again be used to pipe information in from the immediately previous event. It's important to note that when using this as a standalone variable, it will always return the event that occurs immediately before the current event. However, if you're using it prepended before another variable, such as in the previous event name height example, it will instead return the closest previous event for which the field's instrument has been designated. This might be the event that occurred immediately previous, or it might be farther back. This is because a field's instrument might not always be designated for the event that occurs on either side of it. Previous event label will simply pull the label of that previous event. If the current event is the first event, this will be blank. Next event name pulls the name of the event immediately after the current one. Like with the previous event name, you can use this to simply pull the name of the event, or you can prepend it to another variable to pull in information from that previous event in piping or for calculations or logic. When used as a standalone, this one will always return the event that occurs immediately after the current event. However, if you have it prepended to another variable, such as in that next event name height, it will instead return the closest following event for which the field's instrument has been designated. This might not be the event immediately after the current event if the instrument hasn't been assigned to that event. Next event label will pull the event label for the event immediately following the current one. First event name pulls the name for the first event. Like with the previous and next, this can be prepended to another variable to pull information just from that very first event for that variable. When using it as a standalone, it always returns from the first event in the current arm, whereas if it's prepended, it will return from the first event for which that field's instrument has been designated. The first event label pulls the label for the first event. Last event name and last event label work similarly to first event name and first event label, only pulling from the last event in the project, or the last event to which that instrument has been designated. Finally, arm number and arm label will pull the number of the arm that the current record is in, or the label that you have assigned that arm. Previously in REDCap, when you were using repeating instruments or repeating an entire event, you couldn't reference a specific instance at all. Now you can reference a specific instance, similar to how you could always reference a specific event in a longitudinal project. This is useful for things like calculations, conditional logic, and piping. When you're referencing an event in REDCap, you prepend the event name. You put it in front of the variable. For example, event 1, arm 1, then the variable name. To reference a specific instance, you append the instance number to the end of the variable, so variable name 2, to reference the second instance in which that variable name occurs. There are 5 smart variables that can be used with repeating forms, and when you're using them to refer to a specific variable on an instance, you always have to make sure you append the smart variable, just like you would the instance number. This means that you always have to make sure that the smart variable for the repeating form comes after the variable name. The smart variables available for repeating forms are very similar to the ones that are available for longitudinal projects. Previous instance pulls the repeating instance number immediately before the current one. Instance refers to the instance of either a repeating instrument or a repeating event. The current instance will give the repeating instance number of a repeating instrument or a repeating event in the current context. All of these can be used as standalones to simply pull the number, or appended to a variable to pull the information from a variable in a different instance. Next instance will always refer to the number that occurs immediately after the current instance. The first instance will pull the lowest numbered repeating instant number. This may or may not be the first number if you have deleted instances. Finally, last instance will pull the highest numbered repeating instance number for the current record or event context. It can be a little bit difficult to show the smart variables in context because a lot of time they're just pulling piped information. But let's take a look at what that's like. In this project, we have a basic data collection form, a repeating form, and then we're pulling in some descriptive items. Let's take a look at the descriptive items, all of which use smart variables to provide additional information for us about the project. So here I'm using smart variables to pull in information about the project. Under User, I can pull the current user's username, data access group name, data access group ID, and data access group label. I can also pull the record name, the record's current DAG name, ID, and label. It's very important to note that these are always going to be dynamic. So if I logged out of this account and logged in under a different account, that username would change. It's not fixed. Under Form, it's detected that yes, we are looking at this as a data entry form. It's given me a URL for a form that I specified, and I can easily navigate to that. It's also given me a link, customized, that will take me to that form as well. It has successfully detected that this is not being viewed as a survey, but if I want to, I can see the survey URL. There's a survey link with that custom text. I can access the survey queue URL, or click a link to that, and it's telling me the survey completion time as a label, not as a variable, and the survey completion date. Finally, it's displaying a great deal of event norm information. I know what event I'm in, both by name and label. I can tell the previous event and the next event, the first and the last, and what arm I'm in. With repeating forms, it's easier to see it actually in a field for that repeating instance. So there is no previous instrument number because I'm on the first instance right now. Indeed, it's telling me that the current instance number is 1, the next one is 2, and that 1 is the lowest and 2 is the highest. If I move to the second instance, now I can see the previous instance number, but not the next. One of the key places you may have seen this is when you are sending invitations to your survey participants. Instead of providing a hard link to your participants, you now use smart variables to compose your survey invitations. You'll use a survey link smart variable to send them the survey link, looking at it as a URL, and the survey URL smart variable to provide them simply that URL that they can copy and paste if they need to. Smart variables provide a huge range of flexibility and opportunity within REDCap, and we're still tapping the potential of everything that they can do in your projects. I highly encourage you to experiment with them. If you want to look them up yourself, there's a link in every REDCap project. Go to the Project Setup page, and under the Design Your Data Collection Instruments and Enable Your Surveys, there's a link down here that will tell you how to use smart variables. It will take you to a reference page that has all the information that I've just talked about. It provides examples and details on how to use every smart variable currently available in REDCap. This is a great resource for you, and I highly encourage you to read through it on your own. Thank you very much for listening through this. Now go out and experiment a bit and find out how smart variables will work best for your project.